Welcome to Sculpture Vulture. I'm Lucy Branch, a sculptural conservator and author, bringing you a series of interviews with some amazing sculptors who inspire me and I hope will do the same for you. You can see the photographs accompanying the interview, the episode show notes and get a free novel from sculpturevulture.co.uk. Today I have the great pleasure in introducing you to Rodney Munday. He has gained a reputation for his site-specific sculpture in bronze. And in recent years he's secured many public commissions, among them St Andrew, Fisher of Men, a sculpture for the Minster Church of St Andrew in Plymouth, Alfred Russel Wallace, memorial to the evolutionary theorist and polymath, and The Gift at Chichester and Worthing Hospitals. Rodney and I came across each other when he asked me about the suitability of some protective coatings for his upcoming commission for St John the Baptist Church in Cirencester, and I just immediately felt like he was a kindred spirit and I wanted to interview him. So today I thought we'd kick off our chat by asking him about when he began his creative journey.
Right, well, my creative journey really goes back as long as I can remember. I've always drawn. And as a child, I used to make little plasticine figures. And when I first went to school, I was given some little plaster molds for pushing plasticine into, for taking demolding little bits of sculpture, really. And that memory has always stuck with me. And I think when I started making molds for my own work, that all came back. So yes, it's been a long journey.
And was it something that you did when you came out of school? It was always going to be your profession, or did life take you in another direction first?
I suppose life takes me in a lot of different directions. When I was at school, when I was up to the age of about 11, I thought I'd be a writer. And from then on, I wanted to be an artist, but I only really thought about painting because I went to a very good school art-wise. While I was doing A-level, I was doing life drawing with professional models every week, and but I hadn't done any three-dimensional work, though a teacher there told me that I drew like a sculptor. And I went to art school, but I gave up after a week for all sorts of reasons, really. But one, I think, was perhaps that it came as a bit of a disappointment after the education that I had at school. And I then thought that I needed to make up my mind quickly because, for one thing, at that age, 3 years is a long time ahead of you. And also I felt that I needed to make a decision as to what I was going to do. And I went back to school and was just in time to take the Oxford entrance exam. And I then read English for 3 years. And one of my main tutors was a sculptor, which was interesting.
Well, that sounds to me like it was meant to be. There's no way around it.
And then I continued to draw and paint and started sculpting after I left Oxford, really. Most of my time was taken up farming because I was born on a farm, and that was my profession for a long time. And the sculpture just sort of crept in, and somebody at one point suggested that I did some craft fairs, and I happened to attach myself to a craft fair which was at the Hampton Court Flower Show. And while I was in the craft tent, my wife was going around the show and she said, there are some real sculptors out there. She said, that's where you should really be. So I saw them and did Hampton Court the next year and said, how about the Chelsea Flower Show? And they said, oh, well, there's an 8-year waiting list for that. But I managed to get into that a year later. And I did the RHS shows for 10 years, which gave me a worldwide clientele, really. So that was.
It was a side endeavour. It wasn't your main livelihood at the time. You were just doing little bits in the background at home.
That's right. Yes. So it was. It was lovely when it took off, and it took off at the time that farming went into decline, and. Sometimes I find the art goes into decline.
Well, I think everything ebbs and flows, doesn't it?
Ebbs and flows. So it's handy to have both there. I mean, I don't do much in the way of farming now. We have a very small family farm, and most of the work is out to contract. But we do haymaking, and we do a little bit of straw for thatching using old machines.
I was thinking that there's definitely something about not asking too much of your creative self sometimes. If you are needing money from it, I think sometimes it puts the muse or the joy of it under too much pressure, and somehow things don't seem to work when you're trying to force them to happen. But when it sounds like an evolution for you, and when that road takes you there, it's often much luckier in some ways. It's almost like the muse wants to help you as opposed to when you're demanding of it.
Well, I think that is absolutely right. I think that, with regard to the muse, it's not something you can pursue. It's rather more like the wind that bloweth where it listeth, and you have to be open to it. But if you actually chase it, it's like happiness. That's not the way to achieve it.
I remember, I think it's Elizabeth Gilbert, the writer. She tells a fantastic anecdote in her biography about writing, and she has this thing about snakes and how sometimes a creation, it's a snake that is disappearing into a hole and you have to grab it by the tail and force it out. and others slither right past you and sort of wink. And I just thought such a lovely analogy that some just don't want to be there and you have to wrestle them out. So funny, I didn't realise that you'd had this education, such a great education from Oxford in English, but when I was reading about you, what you'd written about your sculptures, it's actually very literary, the way that you write. And so has that never tempted you either? You haven't thought to yourself, maybe I'll put the sculpture to one side for a year or so and dabble in a bit of writing?
Well, I suppose I write what used to be called coterie poetry, so that I write poems really just for people I know and for myself. But I do write the odd thing. I've written a few. When I was farming, I wrote a few articles for Farmers Weekly, and I've written some articles on art recently for the Jackdaw. I don't know if you've come across it. It's a slightly strange art magazine.
I haven't, but I'm going to be checking it out now.
And some time ago, I wrote an article which really sets out the way I think about art, I suppose, which I call The Myth of the Artist, for the Salisbury Review.
Oh, fantastic.
And I'm thinking, actually, with the current commission that I've got, of possibly producing a book to show where it, because it's for the church at Cirencester, and to place what I'm doing within the historical context of Christian art, which is an interesting one, I think.
And is it a particular interest for you, Christian art? Because I see that quite a few of your commissions have that aspect to them.
Yes, I think probably for a number of reasons. One is that I love, above all else, dealing with the human form. I like animals. I like anything that sort of lives and moves. But the human form is an animal form, but also it's one with which it is possible for me to relate directly because I'm a person. And one of the things about religious art is that it almost inevitably involves you in the human form. So that is one thing that I like about it. Another thing that I like is usually the people who are commissioning it to the churches, they're good because they have an idea of what they want. And this is true, I think, of private commissioners as well. It doesn't mean that they're putting you under pressure to do something the way they want it, but they have an idea of what they want. Whereas a lot of commissions that come onto the market, especially those which have to do with development, are the result of things like 106 agreements, where there is an obligation for the person producing the development to have produced a piece of artwork to go with it. And because of that, they have no idea at all of what they want, but they've got money to get rid of. And so they write these briefs, which are usually a load of drivel, and they encourage the artists to write drivel in response, I think.
Oh, it's so funny. When anything is a committee decision, somehow you get... No, I have a lot of similar problems with tenders for projects where I can tell immediately that you read it that the poor person who's been put in charge of it they've never even looked at a piece of bronze. They're not really sure what they're doing, and they've had to write something that anyone who knows even the tiniest little bit sort of thinks, oh no, what are you asking for? It's madness. But it's annoying as well, because it doesn't make being able to fulfill the brief easy in those circumstances, because having a knowledgeable client definitely means I think you can actually deliver a better product in the end for them. So I sympathise with that.
Yes, and the other thing, of course, is that you are then able to have a rapport,
Yes.
Which you can't have otherwise, and that I think is terribly important, because if you have a relationship with the person you're producing something for, it makes you think, because you have to, because it's a two-way thing then, and as one of the Desert Fathers said, the human soul is like a wood shaving coiled around its inner emptiness. And I think anyone who actually spends a lot of time on their own finds that you do need input from outside, because there isn't that much inside a person, really. You can get through it fairly quickly.
Absolutely. I think you're quite right. I often think to myself, I should be thinking much deeper thoughts in life than I actually have. I don't admit it very often, but I quite often catch myself thinking very lightweight.
But I mean, this is the thing. I mean, you can have some good thoughts, but in the end, you run out of them.
Yes.
And you need to have input from outside, I think.
Yeah.
And the other thing with religious art, is that I think that if there is anything that you are involved, that you can actually get involved in yourself, if something that's important to you, you're likely to produce something that's better. And that doesn't matter whether it's just something which is beautiful, or whether it has to do with social justice, or whether it has to do with religion. Anything that actually involves you because it is important to you, then it has value.
Yeah, and much more inspiring to create as well. You're getting much more energy from something like that, I think. I like the idea as well, from a conservation point of view, I like the fact that this relationship that you are able to strike up with the client that really is invested and knows what they want, it's much better for the object in the long run as well, because they're much more likely to look after it properly and not just walk away. It's not just a development, a box they had to tick, and then they're off onto the next project which needs something else fulfilling. They've got that long-term view, just the way you hope that they will, because at some point you have to pass it over, and that's such a lot of work that you've done and invested in it.
Yes, I think that is absolutely true, and it's lovely when you see that it does actually come to mean something for people.
I was going to say, and you get to return to them, do you? Do you get to see the involvement that eventually the community, I suppose, have? Because around a church particularly, you have got that wider community.
Well, yes, that's the case, and I mean, I found that in the church pieces I've done, they've usually wanted me to come and give talks while it's been ongoing, and demonstrations in schools too, which is good. And then afterwards, for the work at at Plymouth Minster, the maquette was given. I gave to the church, and they then have sent it round different schools. And the first school it went to, I went along to the school when they were doing it, which was after the event, which was nice. And I find, generally speaking, I do keep in touch with the people that I've done commissions for. And I think one of the most moving ones, in a sense, in that way, was the work that I did for Western Sussex Hospital Trusts, which was in connection with organ donation. And there are two figures sitting on a bench, and they're passing something between them, which is a gift. You can't see what the gift is, and you don't know which way the gift is going, but I intend it to represent organ donation. And a number of things happened there which I found incredibly moving. One was when it was actually being installed because there are two copies, one in Worthing Hospital, one in Chichester Hospital. And when the one was being installed in Chichester, there was a woman who was staring at it quite intently, and the chief of the commissioning body said to her, you're looking at it intently, what do you think of it? And she said, I just think it's a beautiful distraction. And so she said, what do you mean? She said, well, I've just been told I've got cancer. Oh. And I thought, that I found moving. And then, strangely, when I the next piece went into Worthing, and at the unveiling, there were a couple came up to me, and they said it meant so much to them. They said because their daughter had wanted to give an organ, and she'd been killed in a car accident. She said they hadn't been in time, and they said the figure of the girl looked just like her. And
Wow, that
it that sort of thing. You think, well,
chokes you actually.
it really does, And then I've gone back there occasionally, and I find certainly in Chichester Hospital, somebody's always putting flowers in the hands of the girl, and they're always just left there. And
So
that
lovely.
if you can have that sort of involvement, and you've actually moved people in that sort of way, it is. It's humbling. It is absolutely. It's just a wonderful experience.
And that's where the power in large-scale sculpture, I think, really, and public sculpture. There's a lot of people that will never ever go into a gallery. Sad fact, unfortunately, but there is this aspect to public art in public spaces, where people connect to it and are able to not feel threatened by the fact that somehow an institution that surrounds it makes it more threatening to them, and they feel uncomfortable there. But these spaces are just there. There's just such a wonderful place to be able to engage with sculpture and to see those things, those very precious suggestions in the sculpture and in the art. It's one of the reasons that I love it more than anything else, any other type of art, not just because I work around and with it, but just because I feel that it's a safe space in a way for people to enjoy it and to connect with it.
Yes, and I think you get all sorts of comments, and I'm sure you must find this yourself when you're doing restoration work, that people actually come to you and speak about the pieces you're doing.
Oh, yes. We did the Bomber Command, the vandalism of the Bomber Command last year, where someone had thrown white paint over the sculptures. It must have been a pacifism sort of message, although it wasn't claimed. But we had dozens and dozens and dozens of visitors to that monument, which they came from all over the world, and the stories they told us about the relations they'd had that had served as part of the unit and the individuals in it. I could have done absolutely no work whatsoever. I could have just talked to them all day long.
Right.
They were magnificent, but they engaged. The monument meant so much to them. Some of them had come from all over the world. South Africa said things, we've been here 7 times, and you think, and just to come here to London, that's why we come. Think, wow, what commitment to a sculpture, but that's what it can create.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree. I was going to ask you a little bit about your I don't know if you have a creative practice. Is there anything that you do that helps you to move into the mood to be able to come up with some deep ideas, moving out of the shallow ideas to the deep ideas?
Well, no, I think, as we were saying before, I think that the muse is something which, in a sense, makes use of you rather than you making use of it. In a sense, it's.
You seem to really love your farming. Is that something that being outdoors and things feed into that process, do you think?
Well, I think it has to do with the whole love of creativity. One of the things that I really love to do if I'm taking somebody around the farm in the spring is when the corn is just a few inches high, when it just starts to joint, I like to split the stem open above the first joint and show people the ear of corn, which is then perhaps 2 or 3 millimeters long, with all the grain there, and if it's barley, the beard as well. And there it is. It's like looking into the womb, and that is what it is. Just such a wonderful symbol of creation. And I think what one of the things and that's probably has been a gift that the farm has given me is this wonder at creation. Seeing all sorts of other things like animals as well, but it is that whole creative thing, and I think, and that ties in to some extent with the way in which I've been looking at certainly recently at church pieces. And some years ago, I haven't done a lot of the work I've done actually has all been to commission, and partly because sculpture is an expensive business, and if you're trying to do it yourself, you need to lay out money. But I've done just a couple of pieces for myself, and one was a piece which I called The Creation of Adam and Eve. And the reason I did it was when I was in the old days when I was at a craft fair, I knocked up a little Adam sitting contemplating an apple. And when I finished it, I thought I shouldn't have done it like that because he was complete. I thought I should have had him not made completely, that he himself was being made because the apple was in the garden before Adam was. And it seemed to me that that whole story about the creation of Adam and Eve is and it has always attracted artists, is terribly important because what it gives you is a creator who has an idea, and then he actually gets out there in the world outside himself to make it, which is one of the reasons I'm not terribly keen on conceptual art, because as long as a work of art just remains an idea in your mind, it is stillborn. Mm. So God goes out there and he makes Adam and Eve, and they're not obedient, but he didn't intend them to be. I mean, the apple was shoved there in the garden for them to take it, and that is the freedom that it seems to me the artist gives to his work. And I think that when you're making something, you actually have a relationship with it, and it gets away from you, and you can actually then have a rapport with the thing you're creating. And I think that's true of absolutely every kind of creation. It's true, if you like, of God with Adam and Eve. It's true of parents with their children, and it's true if you're making a work of art as well. It gets away, and it is that rapport, and that is one of the really, really, I think, wonderful things about the whole creative thing, is that in a sense it doesn't just come from you. It's a funny thing from outside.
I totally agree with that. Yeah. I'm at the end of writing a novel at the moment, and I've had to set it aside, and it's just before the end, so it shouldn't be something that I have to set aside. It's just the moment where you would think you were going full steam ahead, but that I can feel it moving away from me rather than towards me, and so I just feel it's the moment to pause. And I that idea of that creation cycle and going with it rather than fighting it. Funny that you did this sculpture it sounds like many years ago, and yet the idea has come back to you. I love that sort of motion within the idea.
Yeah. And it's I mean one of the things, one of the writers I like on this sort of thing is E.M. Forster, and at one point, if I can remember exactly what he says, personality has become far too insistent these days, and I look back to a time when a poem was seen as an inspiration, and it came from outside, and sometimes that inspiration came from God, and that was written by an agnostic. But what he's saying is that, you know, it's not just it's not, the personality is not important. It's something that comes in from which is what inspiration means. Unfortunately, I can't remember his exact quote.
Well, you've done very well to remember. Whenever I'm reaching for a quote, again, it seems to recede into the background. You've done amazing. I was going to ask you if you've had any conservation-related problems with your bronzes. Have you ever had any difficulties either with making them or with thereafter once they've been installed?
No, I mean the first I was really aware of a problem with bronze was with the issue over bronze copper runoff and the greening of bronzes for the Cirencester Commission, which we've spoken about. Because the pieces that I've done, I've just really left outside to sort of mature on their own. Occasionally, if it's been a private work when somebody's moved house or something, and I've had to move it from one garden to another one, I might have just sort of cleaned it off and repolished, but I haven't done any more.
So you quite enjoy the idea of a natural degradation of your work, a sort of decline in terms of surface?
Well, yes, I mean, up to a point. I mean, because I haven't actually seen it go to a point where it has become really detrimental. I mean, there's a sculpture I did in Oxford of St Edmund of Abingdon.
I love that piece. Yeah.
Right, and that was placed on a lovely Yorkstone
bench,
seat, and that I mean that has deteriorated far faster than the bronze, and I actually say to the college that they ought to do something about that, and they were quite happy with the way it was going, because it's in the grounds of their library, which is in fact an old churchyard, and and it's going the same way as all the other stones in the churchyard. But it was such a beautiful piece of stone. I think that was a shame. And I did in fact say to them that if they cleaned it, which I thought they should do, then I would actually wash down and repolish the statue. That had a ferric finish, and that actually has. That's darkened, so you would think it was just a little.
I mean,
more,
over time, all outdoor patinas oxidise, and you get this naturally occurring patina, which can be far more beautiful than what your original creation was. It also, unfortunately, can become disfiguring. It depends on what the environment is providing it, and as to and how it's being used. Obviously, if somebody is consistently sitting on it for photographs, say, it will change very differently to if it's under a drain pipe, say. So you've got that aspect to it. I always think is quite an exciting aspect of seeing where it goes to. Is how is it going to develop? Because you really can't predict these things very often.
No, it's interesting. I mean, I say, I've liked the way things have gone so far.
Yeah, well, I definitely don't advise. Although obviously my work is preservation, I definitely feel that the view of the artist and the sculptor has to be understood before you start doing anything, because very often you get with restoration, I think, people coming in and they're trying to take it back to a point in time where perhaps the artist created it, but that's not necessarily the view of the artist. They want to see it change, and they want to see how people are going to use it and their impression upon it.
Yes, I mean, it is a living thing in a sense, isn't it? In that sense.
And that's why bronze is so beautiful, because it evolves.
Yes, it is. It's a lovely material, and certainly for what I do, it is really ideal, because the material I love to work in is clay, and I always use terracotta clay basically because I think it's important to have a lovely finish in the bronze, but I'm not, because I have a rough finish, I want a fairly plain patination. So I either go for liver or ferric or very sort of straightforward.
But that's
greens.
sensible, because they are very stable colours. It's when you branch out into the very wild and wonderful palettes, which you can achieve with beautiful patinated finishes, but they are much less stable. Those traditional colours will give you much less aggravation in terms of conservation. So good choices. Right.
Yeah. And I mean, they certainly. I mean, the variety of things, as you show in your a rarer gift than gold. That you can do wonderful things, but you need a smooth finish for that. I think. If you're really concerned with the with the form and the shadows that you get within it, then there's nothing like a brown bronze.
Oh, I agree. I love that traditional. We haven't got enough vocabulary in the British language that describes the tones of bronze. Maybe that's what my ambition will be by the end of my lifetime, is to invent a whole vocabulary.
What a wonderful thing to do.
Well, I think we all need to have something to get on with. I think that would be a good one.
Yes, it would indeed. I mean, actually, of course, to some extent, you do that in a rarer gift than gold, because in addition to speaking about that wonderful patination in it, of different colours and the patterning, you also say an awful lot about the brown bronzes themselves and how beautiful they are, as with the doors.
Maybe too much for fiction. Maybe it should have been a non-fiction book.
Well, I don't know. I think it worked very well in it. I mean, but then of course I have that interest. But one thing that strikes me about that, actually, and I do find it extraordinary, is that so many people who end up producing bronzes use a grey clay, and I really find that bizarre. I mean, I know it's cleaner to use, but it doesn't give you the same sense of the shadows and the form that you're going to get if you're using terracotta, which is close to what you're going to end up with.
That's quite right, actually, because the lovely warmth of the colour of that clay, it is. There's a similarity there between the final material, the bronze.
Yeah.
No. So just if you could tell me a little bit about the Cirencester commission that you've got on at the moment. I have obviously seen what you've put up on your website about it, but it does seem like a very interesting project.
Yes, it is. It's a fascinating one. What happened was that back in the 60s, the original statues, which were stone, had become dangerous, and so they were taken down and then lost.
Oh no!
And yeah, well, one of them, I think they were broken up actually as they came down. But one of them, I think the one of John the Baptist, was put into a shed, and the shed caught fire, and that was the end of that one. And nobody knows what happened to the Virgin and Child, or even if it was the Virgin and Child, though they're pretty sure it was. Surprising, it's not that long ago, but there seem to be very, very few photographs of what was there, and not many memories really, which strikes me as bizarre. But anyway, they wanted to replace these, and I was lucky to get the commission, which it really has absorbed my attention in all sorts of ways. It's lovely because it gives me the chance of using the human form again. And for John the Baptist, I was originally going to have him sort of leaning out, brandishing a cross, the last of the Old Testament prophets, but I wasn't really happy with that. And I was speaking to the vicar there, and he said he'd seen an image of John the Baptist, a picture, I think it was, of him with piercing eyes that saw through you, and he said he saw this as an image of God looking through John, so that John was just again inspired, if you like. He was just an intermediary, and I thought that sounded good. And then when I was in the church afterwards, someone came up to me and pointed out a window where John the Baptist was holding a lamb, and all the images I've seen of John the Baptist that I'm aware of, where he's always with him as a child with the lamb. So I thought, well, this was a good one. And he was holding the lamb out, and of course, Cirencester gained its wealth through the wool industry. So it tied in with the town itself as well as just being a Christian symbol. And then for the Virgin and Child, I rather than have the Virgin with a baby, I got a little boy Christ, and because it's going to be up at 60 feet in the up the tower. She's holding him out, having a look, like any inquisitive child with the mother, and of course he happens to be in the position of the crucifixion. So it's, in a sense, it's a cross between Virgin and Child and Pietà. So it was just those sort of really interesting ideas came in. And then I was thinking about John the Baptist and the Virgin and Child, and how they both tie in with the Incarnation, and again, because it was a religious thing, my ideas about creation and the whole creation story and the importance of redemption and the way in which the three tie together. So theologically, I found it very interesting to do, which is one of the reasons why I'd like to write this book to go with it, because the whole process of Christian art, as with Christianity itself, is a changing one, so that people are trying to do different things at different times. And you are always of your own time. But I think what you have to do is keep in mind the continuum that you're a part of. And that I found is very, very
interesting that you've drawn so much from the context of where the sculptures will be, that you've taken different sorts of threads and brought them together actually within these figurative sculptures. But I love the fact that there's so much feeding into them, but definitely that it's of that place, and not just as a generally from text. Obviously there's the textual inspiration as well, but it's a joint ideas coming together there.
Well, I think that is always important, and it's certainly important if you're putting sculpture in somewhere, because that's how you relate to the people who are there, and it is that relationship between the sculptor and the people he's doing it for. Because if there's no relationship, it hasn't got the same importance. I found the same thing for the statue of St Andrew for Plymouth Minster, who's casting a fishing net. And again, the net is still a fishing port, Plymouth. So it has a direct relationship.
Fantastic energy that net has with the sculpture. I think it really has got a sort of captured intensity there that's a really nice piece.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed doing that. It was a lovely piece to do.
Yeah, that was great. So have you any ambitions to have a sculpture in a certain place where if you could have one of your sculptures, where would you have it?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I'm very happy with the places that I've got them at the moment. I mean, Plymouth Minster. I mean, that was such a wonderful site for a sculpture. I mean, I couldn't have asked for anything better than that. It's wonderful on top of those pillars forming an arch. I mean, I couldn't have imagined a better place.
It really looks like it was made for it, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, people have said it looks as though it's always been there, which is
huge compliment.
It's rather nice.
Yeah.
But and again with Cirencester, I think again it's these things happen, and it's not a point of looking for somewhere. I mean, if something turns up like that, you if you were looking for somewhere, you wouldn't find anywhere better.
No.
It's just lovely.
Well, where can people find you if they'd like to know more about your work?
Well, I suppose my website is the best spot. I mean, I've got a Facebook page as well, and I'm on Instagram, but.
I will put those details in the show notes, but if you'd like to just tell everyone what your website address is.
Right, the website is www.rodneymunday, that's all one word, with Monday spelled with a U, at gmail.com.
Perfect. And you're on Facebook, I know. Are you on Twitter?
No, I'm not.
No, so Facebook is your other platform.
That's right. I mean, in a sense, the website is best because I do write about what I've been trying to do in the different pieces. So if anyone's interested to see where they've come from. I don't like huge explanations about works of art. There's too much of that these days. But I do think it's interesting to know why you're doing something and what it has its connections with.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Rodney. I'm really thrilled to have chatted to you today and hope to speak to you again soon.
Well, it's lovely to speak to you too, Lucy, and I look forward to your forthcoming books.
Oh, thank you. Just a small correction there to Rodney's website details. His website is actually rodneymunday-sculptor.co.uk. What a great character Rodney is, and someone I could have spoken to all day. In fact, very nearly did. After our interview ended, we carried on nattering for a good half hour. I could have even gone on longer. I think what struck me more than anything else during this interview was what a great mind he has. And during our chat, I got that sense that although he'd become a sculptor, his creativity is fluid and it could have been expressed in any number of ways. If maybe life had taken him in another direction, it could have been his pen rather than his clay that crafted those ideas he has. And now it's got me wondering whether some great literary works have not been written. We've been deprived of them. Maybe it's best not to think about that. In the next episode coming up, we'll be featuring the mighty Mike Speller. He's a really distinctive figurative sculptor and his work is popping up all over the world. Though being UK-based, he's got a very strong presence in the public spaces here. His works just make you stop and admire, and so I'm really looking forward to sharing that interview with you. If you're looking for a new book, please consider one of my novels about the dark side of the art world, where sculpture is always at the heart of the story. You can get them on the show website, on the usual online retailers, or even better, keep your local library alive, ask for them in there. Thank you for joining me today. Sculpture Vulture has been brought to you by Antique Bronze.